I wasn't supposed to be a hero. In fact, I wasn't supposed to be anything remarkable at all, just a mechanic in a dusty workshop, fixing machines and making do with what I had. But war has a funny way of turning ordinary people into legends, and sometimes it all starts with something as simple as a machine. They called me the Mad Mechanic at first, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. It wasn't that I was crazy. Well, not entirely. I was just the kind of guy who saw potential in things others discarded. To everyone else, it was a broken-down tank, a useless piece of scrap metal that had seen better days. But to me, it was a challenge, a calling, and in a way, it was a machine that changed my life forever. At the time, the war had escalated beyond anything we'd anticipated. The front lines were shifting so quickly that we couldn't keep up with the number of tanks getting destroyed or broken beyond repair. The supply lines were stretched thin, and we were fighting a battle on two fronts, one against the enemy and the other against time and resources. The higher-ups didn't care much for anything except getting new tanks to the front as quickly as possible. If it wasn't combat ready, it wasn't worth anything. But I had a different way of looking at it. I was just a mechanic, sure, but I had spent enough time in that workshop to know that a lot of the tanks that were being written off as unsalvageable still had a lot of life left in them. If you were willing to put in the time, the effort, and maybe a little bit of madness. I had always been fascinated by the idea of rebuilding something, of taking a broken object and breathing life back into it. It wasn't just about fixing a machine. It was about understanding it. And the tanks we were dealing with, they weren't just steel giants. They were survivors, and that's how I saw them. Not as machines, but as partners in a battle they weren't ready to lose. I remember the day it all started. The crew was already working on a tank when I showed up to the repair bay. The tank in question had been hit hard during a skirmish. The shell had torn right through the side, leaving a massive hole in the hull. The turret was completely jammed, stuck at an awkward angle, and the engine was barely running, spitting out black smoke like it was choking on itself. I could hear the grumbles of the other mechanics already writing it off as another lost cause. "Don't waste your time," one of them muttered when he saw me approach. "This one's done for. We'll need a new one before it can get back to front." I didn't listen. They were all talking about the same thing, that the tank was a goner, too far gone to be useful again, but I didn't see it that way. When I looked at that broken, smoking heap, I didn't see something that needed to be replaced. I saw a challenge, an opportunity, and more importantly, I saw a machine with enough fight in it to get back in the game. Mad Mechanic was what they called me when I started working. Maybe it was because I wasn't following the usual procedure. Everyone else was looking for a replacement, a quick fix that would buy us time to get something else to front. But me? I started stripping it down to its bones. I pulled the damaged panels off, the ones that had been charred and torn by the blast. I took the turret apart, carefully working to unjam the mechanism. It was going to take time, and it was going to take patience. Two things the others didn't seem to have, but I didn't care. I was in my element now. The smell of burning oil and metal filled my nostrils, and the sound of tools clinking and whirring became my music. In that workshop, with the sunlight barely breaking through the grime-covered windows, I was in control. For the next several days, I worked on that tank as though my life depended on it, and maybe it did. As the hours stretched into days, I found myself more and more immersed in the repair process. I'd torn the thing down completely, replacing parts here and there, welding cracks, rerouting lines, and testing every system to make sure everything could run smoothly. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I looked at the mangled frame and wondered if I was wasting my time. But then I'd catch sight of the engine, the way it still had that potential deep inside it. I could almost hear it humming, waiting for its moment. The more I worked, the more I could feel it. I wasn't just fixing a tank. I was making it alive again. The others started watching from a distance, quietly curious. They'd smirk and shake their heads, calling me a mad mechanic, sure, but I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for the machine and for the soldiers who would depend on it when the time came. The first time that engine roared to life, I swear the ground beneath my feet shook. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't graceful. The engine coughed, sputtered, and groaned like it was waking up after a long sleep. But it ran. It ran. And in that moment, I knew I'd done it. I'd brought that tank back from the brink. I wasn't a mad mechanic. I was a man who could see what others couldn't. I could see beyond the damage, beyond the fear of failure. I could see a machine still fight. As the crew gathered around to see the tank running again, I stood back, wiping the sweat from my brow. They weren't laughing anymore. They were watching in awe, eyes wide, as the beast came. It wasn't the prettiest machine in the world. No, it was scarred and rough around the edges, a patchwork of repairs and makeshift solutions. It was alive, and that was all that mattered. The first test came sooner than I expected. The front lines had already shifted again, and we were in desperate need of every working vehicle we could get our hands on. The beast, the tank I'd spent days breathing life back into, was the last one ready to roll. The higher-ups came through the workshop with their usual impatience, eyes flicking over the tanks, glancing at me, and then dismissing my work as madness. But when they got to the beast, the commanding officer stood there, arms crossed, staring at the tank. I could see his thoughts in the way his eyes scanned it. He was measuring its worth, judging its potential. The others had already given up on it, but I hadn't. I'd fixed it, rebuilt it, and now it was time to prove that it could still hold it. I knew this moment was critical. I wasn't just testing a tank. I was proving that I wasn't just some mechanic. I wasn't mad. I was a man who had found a way to make something broken better. Is it ready? The officer's voice was sharp, but I could hear the edge of uncertainty, but he didn't believe it. But I didn't have the luxury of doubt. It's ready, I said firmly, stepping forward. Let's see what it can do. I had made sure the tank was as combat-ready as I could get it. The engine was purring now, a growl of power that rumbled deep in its gut. The turret was responsive, the tracks sturdy. It wasn't pretty, but it was strong. And in war, strength is what mattered. The crew, who had once mocked me, now stood in silence as I climbed up into the commander's seat. There was a moment where it felt like the world held its breath, a brief pause in time. The tank's massive engine roared to life, and the ground seemed to shake beneath its weight. I gripped the controls, feeling the power surge through my hands, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. The tank moved forward, sluggish at first, but then faster, smoother than anyone had expected. We rolled out of the workshop and onto the dirt road, the sound of its engine filling the air. The crew followed behind in a convoy of jeeps, watching in disbelief. The beast was moving, and it wasn't just moving, it was thriving. As we drove toward the staging area near the front lines, I could feel the adrenaline start to build in my chest. This was it. This was the moment, the real test. We'd barely arrived when the enemy struck. An ambush. Heavy artillery fire rained down, and I heard the first explosion too close for comfort. The ground trembled beneath the force of the shells. The crew jumped into action, their voices frantic over the radio. But I wasn't paying attention to them. I was focusing on the rumbling beneath my feet, on the way the beast handled the impact of the shock waves. It was holding steady. Every blast that hit the ground near us, every piece of shrapnel that whizzed past, the tank kept its course, kept its momentum. I leaned into the control, guiding us through the chaos. I could hear the other tanks in the distance firing, responding to the enemy's barrage. But the beast wasn't faltering. It was stronger than it had ever been before. I could feel its raw power coursing beneath my hands, and with each passing moment, I grew more and more certain this was a tank. It was a force of nature. The first enemy tank appeared on the horizon. See the smoke trailing from its barrel, hear the shriek of its cannon as it fired. The crew braced for impact, but I was ready. With a quick turn of the turret, I aimed and fired. The shot hit true. The enemy tank exploded in a burst of fire and metal. I didn't have time to savor the victory. Another one appeared, then another. The battle had only just begun, and I was in the thick of it. But the beast, it never flinched. It surged forward, unstoppable. Every shot we fired landed, and each one pushed the enemy back. The crew's voices over the intercom were now filled with excitement, their disbelief slowly giving way to pure adrenaline-fueled exhilaration. The mad mechanic had done it. I had taken a broken, discarded machine and turned it into something legendary. The battle lasted for hours. When it was over, the field was littered with the wreckage of enemy tanks and abandoned weapons. The officers who had once doubted me now looked at me with a different kind of respect. The crew patted me on the back, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine admiration. But it wasn't about the recognition, it was about something more. It was about proving that anything, no matter how broken or defeated, could be made whole again with the right hands and the right heart. As the smoke cleared, the battlefield fell. I stood there next, my hand still gripping the control. I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. We had taken on the impossible and come out on top. And in that moment, I knew something important. It wasn't just the tank that had been reborn. It was me. I wasn't just a mad mechanic anymore. I was a creator, a survivor, a man who had learned the line between madness and genius is razor. After the battle, the word about the beast spread faster than I could have ever imagined. The first report came through on the radio, just a brief mention, but it was enough to catch the attention of everyone who mattered. The tank had held up under fire, taken out several enemy tanks, and helped secure the position in a way no one had. They called it the miracle. I knew better. There was no miracle involved. It was sweat, grease, and a relentless belief that if I could just get it right, if I could push through the cracks, it would work. And it did. But it wasn't just about the tank anymore. The beast had become a symbol, something more than just a machine. It had become a rallying cry, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when it seemed like all hope was lost, there was always a way to push. That was the message I heard from them. They talked about the tank like it was a hero, like it had defied the odds to show them the way. For a moment, I almost believed it myself. Every time I saw that hulking metal machine roll onto the field, it felt like the atmosphere shifted. The air would hum with anticipation, and soldiers would stop what they were doing to watch it pass. Some would even clap or shout, cheering as it moved, and for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just following orders anymore. I was leading something that was making a real difference in the fight. The idea that my work, that my hands had turned this old broken beast into a weapon of war was overwhelming. But more than that, it was humbling. It wasn't about the glory. It was about seeing something rise from the ashes, knowing you played a part in that. We were sent into more skirmishes, more battles, and every time the beast performed beyond expectation. I saw soldiers looking at it the way you look at a prized fighter, the kind of machine you trust when everything else seems to be falling apart. It wasn't the most polished tank, nor the most advanced, but it was reliable. And in war, there's nothing more valuable than reliability. But the battlefields don't wait. The enemy adapted quickly, and soon we found ourselves in a more dangerous corner of the front. This time, the stakes were higher. We had a fresh assignment, break through an enemy stronghold that had been dug in for weeks. They had fortified positions, anti-tank guns, and reinforcements coming in from all directions. It was a suicide mission for any regular tank. Many of our others had already been written off as lost or destroyed. The beast? We all knew this was its moment. It was made for this kind of fight. We rolled in early in the morning, just before the sun came up. There was a chill in the air, and the ground was still damp from the night's rain. The sound of our treads grinding through the mud felt like thunder in the quiet morning. I sat behind the controls, the crew around me, all of us waiting for what was coming. I knew the odds, and I knew what would happen if we failed. The first wave of artillery came in fast. The sky exploded above us with shell fire, and I could feel the shock waves rattling the beast. I pushed the throttle forward, feeling the power surge beneath me, urging the tank to push through. We took hit after hit. Shells blasted the sides, shaking the entire frame. The tank held firm, its armor taking the hits without flinching. I heard the crew over the intercom calling out orders, their voices tight with tension, but no one panicked. We were ready for Then we saw it, the enemy's line of defense, the anti-tank guns. The soldiers were dug into the earth, barely visible, waiting for us to cross their line of sight. But we were too close now. I ordered the turret to turn, aiming at the first position. A burst of fire erupted, and the first gun went up in flames. The others fired back, but the beast kept moving. We weren't slowing down. I could feel the tank respond, steady and unwavering as I gunned the engine. Every round we fired was deadly accurate, the blast air lighting up the dawn sky. We pushed forward, breaking through the outer defenses, but the enemy didn't retreat. They were digging in deeper, bringing out more firepower, and just when I thought we might be losing the edge, I saw it. Another tank, this time much bigger than ours, charging in from the left. They had brought reinforcement. It was a battle of machines now, a fight to the death. The tank was fast, its cannon ready to fire, but the beast had something it didn't: resilience. I turned the turret, lining up the shot as it barreled toward us. The first round missed, but I didn't hesitate. We fired again. This time, the shot hit. The enemy tank exploded in a violent burst of fire and smoke, the wreckage skidding to the side. I couldn't help but let out a breath of relief, but I didn't have time to dwell. The battlefield was still raging, and we had to keep moving. We pushed forward, breaking through their defenses one by one. With each victory, the beast earned more respect, and for the first time, I realized that this was no longer just a tank. It was a legend in the making. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about what this tank had come to represent: strength, endurance, and the will to never give up, even when the world told you. By the time the battle was over, the enemy had been pushed back, their defenses shattered, and we had secured the position. The cost had been high. Many of our men had fallen, and our losses were considerable. But the beast had done what no one thought it could. It had survived, and it had made history. After the battle, something strange happened. The reputation of the beast didn't just remain confined to our squadron or even our division. It spread like wildfire. Word of the tank that should have been scrap metal, the one that refused to die, reached the higher-ups. Reports came in from all directions, from men and women who had witnessed the tank in action, describing it as unstoppable, relentless, and the most terrifying sight on the battlefield. I remember one officer even referred to it as a living, breathing tank in a debriefing, like it had a soul of its own. I had always been a mechanic, and as much as I loved tinkering with engines, I wasn't prepared for the shift in attention. Suddenly, I wasn't just some grease monkey working behind the scenes. No, I had become something more. The beast was my creation, but now it was everyone's legend. But with that fame came a different kind of pressure. Everyone wanted to know how I'd turned a wreck into a warrior. My inbox was filled with questions. My superiors began sending more tanks my way for repairs, wanting me to work magic on them. They expected miracles, and the truth was, I wasn't sure I could repeat it. The beast had been a unique challenge, a tank that no one had given a machine that spoke to me in a way others didn't. The idea of recreating that same miracle on another machine seemed impossible, and yet I tried. I worked on tank after tank, pouring myself into each one the same way I had the beast, but none of them ever felt this. They weren't broken in the same way, didn't have the same heart, It wasn't just the mechanics I was working on anymore, it was the soul of the machine, the one thing I couldn't teach anyone to see. Despite the pressure, the praise, and the constant requests, I stayed focused on what mattered. The battlefield was where the beast truly shone, not in the workshop. The tank had become more than just a machine. It was a statement. It represented everything I believed in: resilience, ingenuity, and the idea that even when things are at their lowest, there's always a way to turn it around. But with that newfound respect came greater expectation. The officers started sending me to more critical missions. They didn't just want the beast to be functional. They wanted it to lead, to take on impossible assignments, and prove that the mad mechanic could not only build machines, but build legends. The pressure was building, but I couldn't back down. Not now. One such mission came when we were tasked with a final push, an assault on an enemy stronghold that had been holding ground for months. The higher-ups were hoping for a quick strike to break their lines and take control of the area before reinforcements arrived. There was no room for failure, and this time they wanted the beast leading the charge. I stood there, staring at it before the mission, the weight of everyone's hopes hanging on my shoulders. The rest of the squadron was preparing, loading up their weapons, checking their gear, but I couldn't help but focus on the tank. It was as if I was standing in front of an old friend, someone who had been with me through thick and thin, a constant reminder of what we could do when we pushed past the limits. The crew was ready. I could see it in their faces. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were believers. They'd seen what the beast could do, and now they trusted. They trusted me. The thought of that gave me strength. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making sure we came home together. The operation started early, before dawn, and the plan was simple: push through the enemy lines, neutralize their defenses, and clear a path for the infantry to take the stronghold. But what we didn't know was that the enemy had prepared a trap. They had reinforced their defenses with a combination of anti-tank weapons, sniper positions, and new artillery that had been hidden away until we got close enough. It was a setup, and we walked straight into it. The first sign that something was wrong came when we hit the outer perimeter of their defenses. The ground shook as the artillery opened up, and I heard the first round hit the beast with a deafening boom. The armor was holding, but I could feel the vibrations traveling through the tank, a reminder of how much pressure it was under. The crew was silent, focused. There was no time for fear. We kept moving, blasting through barricades and enemy positions, but the closer we got to their core, the more fire we took. It wasn't just artillery now. It was tank, infantry, everything they had. The enemy was desperate, so was I. I called for the first fire maneuver, adjusting the turret to take out an enemy tank coming up fast on our left. The shot rang true, and we saw the enemy tank explode in a fiery eruption. But even as we celebrated that victory, another enemy tank appeared on our right, flanking us from the rear. They were everywhere. I knew we couldn't hold this position for much longer. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. But then I remembered something I had learned from all my time working with the beast. When everything seems impossible, you just have to keep pushing. You have to trust in the machine, trust in your crew, and never stop moving forward. I locked eyes with the crew through the periscope. There was no time for words. They knew what needed to be done. The tank was already moving faster now, breaking through the enemy's last line of defense. I aimed the turret once more, fired, and watched as the beast tore through their artillery positions with the force of a wrecking ball. The enemy didn't know what hit them. The hours passed like minutes, and before I knew it, we had broken through. The enemy's defenses were in shambles, and we had taken control of the stronghold. The crew was exhausted, battered, but we had done it. The beast had done it again. As we stood there, victorious but weary, I realized something The beast wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a symbol of something bigger than us. It was a reminder of what we could accomplish when we refused to give up. And maybe that's what the war was really about. Not just fighting the enemy, but fighting through everything that tried to break you. When the mission was over and the dust settled, I stood next to the beast once again. It was scarred, dented, and battle-worn, but it was still standing. So was I. When the dust finally settled after the battle for the stronghold, I stood there next to the beast, feeling like a man who had been to hell and back, and yet somehow had managed to come out the other side. The air was thick with the smoke of destroyed tanks and the cries of the wounded, but there was that moment. We had made it. We had done possible. In the days that followed, I found myself living in a strange kind of limbo. The war raged on, but for me, everything felt different. There were no more questions about how to repair tanks. Everyone already knew I was capable of bringing anything back to life. But that wasn't the same as being part of the fight anymore. The beast had become its own, and now it was more than just the mechanic who brought it to life. I was the one who'd created the unkillable, the unstoppable, the tank that no one believed in. Suddenly, everyone wanted the story. The praise came in waves, messages from other units, commanders asking for my presence in debriefs, reporters wanting to know how I did it. They all wanted answers. They all wanted to know how one man with nothing but grit and a few tools had turned a hopeless piece of junk into the weapon that had changed the course of battle. They wanted a story of heroism, of bravery, of genius. But the truth was, I didn't have any answers for them. I wasn't a hero. I was just a man who saw potential where others saw only scrap. I remember one of the interviews I had to do in the wake of the battle. The reporter sat across from me, notebook ready, pen in hand. "How did you manage it?" he asked, eyes wide with fascination. "How did you make the beast unstoppable?" I paused, trying to find the words, but all I could think about was the long hours in the workshop, sweat and the grease, the way the tank had become an extension of my own will, something I knew inside and out. There was no magic, no secret, just a refusal to give up. It wasn't about making it unstoppable, my voice quieter than I expected. It was about believing it could be. The reporter didn't get it, but that's fine. No one else did either. They saw the tank, but they didn't see the work, the love, the flaw, the moments when I thought all going to fall apart. As the war moved forward, the beast was sent into more engagement, each one more intense than the last. Its legend grew with every successful mission. It was no longer just a tank. It was a symbol of defiance. It was the embodiment of survival, of doing whatever it took to keep going, even when the odds were against. Other soldiers looked to it for hope, and as strange as it was, I began to realize that the same hope was being placed in me. They looked to me not as a mechanic, but as a symbol of something more: resilience, ingenuity, and the refusal to bend under pressure. But with that responsibility came an enormous weight. The soldiers who relied on the beast weren't just fighting the enemy. They were fighting for something larger than themselves. They were fighting for survival, for a future. And that future was on the line every time that tank rolled out. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a promise that no matter how bad things got, no matter how impossible the odds seemed, they could still make it, and I had to make sure that promise was kept. One night, after a particularly brutal battle, I found myself alone in the workshop, staring at the disassembled parts of a new tank that had come in for repairs. It wasn't nearly as damaged as the beast had been, but I couldn't stop thinking about what it would take to bring it back to life the way I had done before. But the reality was starting to set in. The beast wasn't just a project anymore. It was part of me, a part of everything I'd been through. The pressure was enormous. I wasn't sure if I could recreate the same magic. That night, I found myself staring at the wreckage of the battlefield in my mind. The faces of the men who had died, the lives that had been torn apart, and yet In the silence, I realized something. I wasn't alone in this. None of us were. The men in the Beast, the crew, the soldiers who fought with us, they had made it. The Beast wasn't just a tank. It was a testament to everything they had done, to everything they were willing to do. The next day, I went back to work. I fixed tanks, worked on engines, but in the back of my mind, I knew the real battle was still ahead. The war wasn't over, but somehow it felt different now because I knew deep down that no matter what happened, we could face it together. As time passed, the Beast became more than just a machine. It became a part of the legend of this war. It was the underdog that had defied the odds, the vehicle that had taken us to places we never thought we'd reach. And just like the tank, I had become something I hadn't expected, something that wasn't just about surviving, but about showing others how to do the same. And in the end, that was all I had ever wanted to prove. The war, as wars do, didn't last forever. And when it finally came to an end, when the enemy lines fell apart and the world seemed to breathe again, I realized something strange. It wasn't the victories that mattered most. It wasn't the glory, the medals, or the praise. No, it was the moments that came in between, the quiet, the ones where you could finally let the weight of everything you'd been carrying rest on your shoulders. The Beast had earned its place in history, and I had earned my reputation. But both of us were scarred by what we had been through. The war had broken so much, the men who fought, the machinery, the land beneath our boots. Yet, in all that wreckage, there was something incredible we had discovered, that even the most broken things could still be fixed, that even when it felt like everything had been lost, there was always a chance to rebuild, to fight again. I wasn't the same man who had first walked into that workshop, covered in grease and oil, with the hope of fixing a tank that no one believed in. The war had taken something from me, sure, many things. The faces of friends who would never come back, the weight of every tank that had fallen under my watch, and the knowledge that not everyone made it out. But in exchange for those losses, it had given me something else. Purpose. Purpose, a strange thing. It doesn't come from medals or from the cheers of crowds. It comes from within, from seeing something broken and realizing you can make it work again. From understanding that the most meaningful moments in life don't always have to be big, loud, or heroic. Sometimes they're the quietest moments, when you look at something you've rebuilt and you know it will keep fighting long after you're gone. The men who had served in the Beast with me, those who had witnessed the miracles it worked, the triumphs it helped secure, they were scattered now, back to their lives. Some had returned to their homes. Some had moved on to new battles. But when I met them again, in the years after, the look in their eyes told me everything. They didn't see me as the mad mechanic anymore. They didn't see me as the guy who had fixed a tank. No, they saw me as a reminder of what can be achieved when we push through the impossible. It's funny, in a way, how history chooses the things it remembers. The stories of great generals, the battles that shifted the tides of war, those are the things that the world remembers. But there are others, quiet heroes who don't make the headlines, the ones who work behind the scenes, who never ask for credit, the ones who get it done when it seems like nothing is going to work. The Beast wasn't a hero in the traditional sense, and neither was I. But we both did what no one thought was possible. I've been to reunions over the years, places where veterans of all wars gathered to share stories, to relive moments of their past. And every time I see an old face, I can't help but remember what we were all. It wasn't just about victory. It was about survival. It was about finding a way through the darkness, even when it felt like we would never make it out. The war left its mark on us, but it also taught us something priceless, that you can always rise, you can always rebuild, even when everything seems lost. I don't go to those reunions much, and time has a way of taking things from you, friends, faces, moments, but I still think about them. I think about the beast, about how it wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol, a living thing that stood for everything we were willing to do, everything we had to fight for. I think about how, in the end, we all carry pieces of the past with us, whether we want to or not. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, I still hear the rumble of the beast's engine, its roar filling the air as it charges forward. And for a moment, I'm back in the field, sitting in the commander's seat, the world roaring around us, but knowing that we weren't alone. We were a team, the beast and me, and together we were unstoppable. The years of the war, the story lives on. It's told by the soldiers who fought alongside the beast, by the ones who learned to believe in the impossible, and by those who, like me, took something broken and made it whole again. The legend of the beast will never, and as long as I'm here, I'll keep telling the story. Not because it's mine, but because it belongs to everyone who ever believed that, even in the darkest moments, a little bit of hope can turn everything around. And if you made it this far, if this story has sparked something in you, then take a moment, share it, like it, because it's more than just a tale of a tank. It's a tale of resilience, of rebuilding, of never giving up. And it's a story we all need to remember. As the years passed and the war became a distant memory, I often found myself standing by the window of my small workshop, gazing out at the quiet horizon. The world had moved on faster than I could keep up. The memories of the beast, of the crew, and of those long, grueling days on the front lines faded into the background, just like the smoke that once filled the air after every battle. But some things don't. Some things stay with you, carved into the fabric of who you are, etched into your bone. I'm older now, quieter, and the world looks different. The same hands that once wielded wrenches and tools now ache with the weight of time, but I still find solace in the hum of an engine, the process of fixing something that's broken. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I find myself tinkering with old engines, just like I did back in the war. And in those moments, I still hear the beast in the back of my mind, the roar of its engine, the feel of its power under my control. I can still picture crew beside me, the tank, charging forward. We were a team, and in the end, we won. It's strange, isn't it? How a single thing, a single moment can change the course of your life. How one decision, one effort can make a difference that lasts far beyond what you ever imagined. The beast wasn't just a tank. It wasn't just metal and wheels. It was a symbol of everything that could be rebuilt, everything that could be saved, even when it seemed impossible. It was a reminder that even the most broken things could be given a second chance. And sometimes those second chances are the most powerful things in the world. I never set out to make a legend. I didn't expect the tank to become a hero or for my name to be remembered alongside it. But it had, and with it came a responsibility I never fully understood till years later, because legends don't fade. They live on in the stories told by those who remember, and in the hearts of those who learned something important from them. The day the beast was finally retired, it was sent to a museum, a place where people would come to see it, to marvel at what it had become. It sat there, no longer on the front lines, no longer a force of destruction, but a testament to what it presented. And I stood there in front of it, older, quiet, proud. I never asked recognition. I never needed the fame, but I understood that it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the men and women who fought the beast. It was about those who had believed in it and those who never stopped pushing, even when the world said it was over. And now, when people ask me about it, about the beast, about the war, about the impossible task that became a legend, I don't talk about the battle, tanks, repairs. I don't talk about the blood or the sweat or sleepless nights. No, I tell them something simpler. I tell them this: it wasn't the tank that made the difference. It was the will to keep going. It was the belief that even when everything seemed lost, there was always a way forward. And sometimes that's all you need. If I've learned anything from all of this, it's that we're all capable of more than we think, that even when we feel like we're broken, we still have the strength to. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how far we go from the battles we fought, there will always be a part of us that remembers what it's like to stand tall, to keep moving, and to rebuild. So if you're out there struggling with your own battles, with your own brokenness, remember this story. Remember the beast. Remember that even when you feel like you've hit your lowest point, there's always a way to rise again. And in the end, it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get back up.